Everyone. Hopefully you've been having a great time here at ESI London. I certainly have been networking with a lot of great companies and learning about esports. Today we're going to talk about diversifying investment in esport and certainly how New Wave Esports does it. If you don't know me, I'm Dan Mitre, CEO of New Wave Esports. I like to start with my background, kind of qualify myself and talk about my team a little bit. I'm a 17-year video game industry veteran. I was on the publisher developer side. And I ran global marketing campaigns for AAA titles and bringing in community engagement programs, really keeping our players plugged into the game through the live service of a lot of our AAA titles. And I worked at companies like EA, Activision, THQ, Sega, and my recent franchise was the Battlefield franchise. So I got to launch Battlefield 4, Hardline 1, and 5, which was a very challenging title if you followed the 5 campaign. But what I learned in my experience in publishing and development is, number one, how games are developed, and the big transition from just a box product to an online live ecosystem with a live service, and how important it is that you have sticky retention models that then play into esports and competitive gaming. So getting into the minds of our gamers and understanding what motivates them is important as we bring that foundation over to esports. Now, I'm joined by my financial counterpart, Trumbull Fisher, which we'll talk about a little later. He's 13 years in the finance industry, raised a lot of capital in cannabis and mining in Canada, brings his expertise in building great businesses over to esports. So we're this double-headed dragon that we call New Wave. So who is New Wave Esports? We're an acquisition, investment, and technology development company with the sole goal of elevating esports and competitive gaming. This is what we're passionate about. It's in our blood. And we do this by placing working capital into small and mid-stage companies. But we're unlike your traditional investment group where, hey, here's a check, we'll check in every quarter, what's the performance of our return. We actually get really involved in our companies. So I like to tap into my network in gaming, bring in new collaborations, partnerships with publishers and developers, new sponsorship revenue opportunities, and then obviously working our financial networks to bring in more working capital and help build better businesses. So a lot of time we take advisory roles within companies. We really become a part of the team and set strategy and contribute to those revenue streams. So our mission with New Wave Esports, number one is to go public. We'll talk about it a little later, but we're actually slated to go public on the Canadian Securities Exchange here later in the year. I'm really excited about that. We are esports, so we become synonymous with esports over the past 6 months. We're going to continue doing that as we grow the competitive gaming industry together. We're always looking for profitability. Obviously, there's a lot of top-line revenues coming in with esports companies, but the profit margins are pretty small, and we're looking to expand those. We do that with building in equity in our companies that we invest in, whether it's a cash investment or some sort of share exchange. And we also develop solutions for the growing demands of the esports industry. Our beliefs within New Wave Esports, number one is the world of esports is just barely tapped. Asia is very much mature. They're leagues ahead of us. Europe is just behind them. And so it's obviously good to be here in the epicenter of that. But North America has a lot of potential to grow. But the world is looking at what North America is doing, especially with the big headlines coming in, big celebrities bringing in capital and expanding some of these companies that are contributing to the esports industry. Within New Wave, we're experts. Obviously, with my background and my team's background, we're industry veterans. And we very much lean into those to help companies grow. And we also believe that the more people investing in esports, well, the better esports is going to get. A lot of us are very much in tune with esports, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the history of esports, but some of you may not know that esports started back in 1972 with a game called Space War at Stanford University. Was the first competition that was held. Then you fast forward to 1997, you had the Red Annihilation, which was a 2,000-person event playing Quake. So this is an industry that's been here for a while. A lot of people say, oh, is this a bubble that's going to pop? Well, it's actually been around for quite some time. Now we're just building good ecosystems around it. So let's talk about diversifying investment in esports and how we do it within New Wave. We look at the esports industry in 4 different sectors. There's 4 different revenue growth opportunities that we really sink our resources into. The first one is, I think, obvious: teams, leagues, and organizations. A lot of big headlines coming out about whether it's Drake putting in $30 million into 100 Thieves or Will Smith and his foundation putting in money for Gen G. Those are the big headline moments. We'll talk about some of the investments that we've placed, but teams and leagues are certainly generating the biggest top-line revenues, but are struggling to find bottom-line profitability. So we're always looking to dial in better business practices with the teams we invest in, the leagues and the orgs, and find new ways to make great money and continue to perpetuate a sustainable business. Secondly is events and activations. So this is the raw, visceral feel of esports, going to an event, experiencing that real energy in real time. And that opens up new opportunities with merchandising, obviously ticket sales, but also on-site sponsorship. Platforms and networks. So I look at esports as a pyramid, and at the top of that pyramid is your teams and leagues that affect sort of the 1% of participants within esports. Well, I want to reach out to the 99%. If I could get 2 million people into my platform, monetize on 25 cents, that's much more stable than, am I going to win the next international 10 next year. Then we have technologies and tools. So like I said, we develop great technologies for the ever-increasing demands of solutions within esports, but there's also other great companies that do that. One is here at the event, Omni Coach. They're doing some great things in allowing coaching tools and really dialing up on talent within esports. So that's a good segue. One of the first companies that we acquired is Thunderbolts CDG. They're a company based out of Los Angeles, and they had a great track record in developing apps for 40-plus startups within LA. And now they're retooled to conceptualize some solutions for esports. So they're looking at some platforms. They're looking at betting, which is a big emerging market. There's a lot of great legislation that's passing that's allowing betting to expand more throughout the domestic US and throughout the world. So we're tapping into them to develop new solutions. Within the events and activations sector, we've invested in EvenMatchup Gaming. We got a big equity stake in them. We're also an advisor to them. And what they're doing is leading the biggest Super Smash Brothers tournaments in Canada and tri-state area. They're officially partnered with Nintendo. They've got great endemic and non-endemic sponsorship with like Red Bull and BenQ. We hosted one of their biggest events, Get On My Level 2019, back in May. So they came in and said, okay, we want to see 1,000 kids come out paying $100 each. We want to see 500,000 live stream concurrent views. This all helps with sponsorship, CPM models, merchandising. I said, no. We're New Wave Esports. We could certainly dial that up. Let's go for double that. So we saw 2,100 kids come out. We saw just under 1 million live stream views. It was an industry success. So replicating that for all of our companies within our portfolio is our sweet spot, and that's how we add significant value to our investments. Thirdly, Tidal Gaming is another big company that we invested in. We secured 2 advisory roles. They own and operate Team Lazarus. Some of you may have not heard them, but as of just recent, they made major headlines by taking home $3.5 million in the Fortnite World Cup. They took second in the duos, fourth in the singles, and won a side brawl. So all that great money goes back into that company, continues to build out their revenue streams. So they're seriously pulling some great money in sponsorships. They're attracting better athletes into their roster. They play across 12 different games. But what I like about them most is their goal with diversity. So they have one of the first all-women's esports teams competing in CSGO and League of Legends. And they just partnered with She Is. So really like what they're doing there, and I think more teams need to have sort of that innovative, philosophical approach to esports that's inclusive of everybody. And then finally, within our platforms and networks sector, we invested in a company called Playline. Playline brings daily fantasy sports over to esports. They're partnered with NASCAR. They're at every NASCAR race throughout this next year. They're partnered with Twitch, with the Twitch Rivals program coming up, breaking into esports. They're one of the very few bottom line profitable companies within esports. So looking at them and replicating some of their success and bringing some of their contributions over to all of our portfolios is really important as we learn to build out better businesses. And then finally, we also invest in shells. So Avatar One Esports Corp is looking for a gambling or betting platform that will inject all of the shell money into a company, bring that to public. So it doesn't even have to be a real company. It could be a conceptual paper company that we're looking to invest in. So it's important that you look at all those sectors, right? So we invested in teams. We invested in platforms and activations. We invested in events and tech and tools. It's important to diversify your portfolio as you have the rise and fall in different revenue opportunities. And we bring that diversification into New Wave purposely as we go public on the CSE here in October. So why do that? Why not just stay private? Well, this opens up great liquidity for our shareholders, allows me to really encourage shareholders to cash in their warrants. And that'll bring in more money into my treasury, so that way I can go fuel more businesses within esports. And then ultimately brings in the public investment vehicle. So we're one of the first companies, one of the first investment companies that are going public within Canada. We'll be listing here in Europe and probably some US OTC markets as well. So we're certainly creating some wakes, and we're looking at new companies to invest in and become part of our family. This is probably a little outdated, but our current capitalization structure. I'd love to talk with you afterwards and talk a bit more about the hardcore numbers. And then obviously I talked about our team. So very much Trumbull Fisher, based out of Toronto, is very much leading in our financial department. So I'd love for him to come out sometime and meet you guys as well. And then finally, the rest of our team is very much fueled by great advisors. So we're always on the hunt for building out our team. We've got a team full of, again, financial expertise, great minds in gaming, whether it's marketing or on the development side. And they're out there. They're really helping us expand New Wave, but also looking at all the great deals out there. So I'll end this by saying that New Wave Esports is primarily looking at great deal flow. So we're going to be expanding into Asia. We're going to be setting up New Wave Esports Asia and New Wave Esports Europe. And so that's why I'm excited to be here today. I'm meeting with a lot of you a little later in some one-on-ones, but if you can catch me, I'd love to learn about some of your companies, how you're contributing to esports, how we can collaborate beyond just the cash investment, possibly some sort of equity exchange, but more importantly, tapping into the New Wave Esports network. So with that, I'll open up to any questions that may be here in the audience. Okay, if not, then please grab me later. Love to talk with you. Thank you for your time.